As we move forward from foreclosure, pre-foreclosure, and distressed property transactions, we now shift into a broader concept that directly impacts how property can be used, developed, and valued: land use controls and encumbrances. While previous sections focused on ownership and transfer, this section focuses on what rights actually come with that ownership. This is a natural progression in the course. Once a property is acquired, whether through a traditional sale, short sale, or REO transaction, the next question becomes, what can the owner legally do with that property? Land use controls are created and enforced at the local level, allowing communities to regulate growth, preserve resources, and maintain property values. Understanding land use control authority. States delegate the authority to regulate land use to local governments, such as cities and counties. This allows communities to manage development in a way that aligns with local needs and priorities. This ties directly back to earlier discussions on risk management and disclosure. Agents must understand that property value is not just determined by the structure or condition, but also by legal limitations on its use. For example, a property purchased with the intent to operate a business may be restricted by zoning or deed limitations, creating significant issues for the buyer if not properly identified. Encumbrances, limitations on property rights. Encumbrances are claims, charges, or liabilities attached to a property that can affect its value or use. Unlike ownership rights, encumbrances can restrict what an owner can do with the property. These may include deed restrictions, leases, easements, licenses, and liens. This connects directly to earlier sections on foreclosure and REO transactions. Liens, for example, play a major role in distressed property scenarios and can impact title and transfer. Understanding encumbrances is critical because they often survive the transaction and continue to affect the property long after closing. Deed restrictions and covenants. Deed restrictions, often referred to as covenants, conditions, and restrictions, CC&Rs, are commonly used in subdivisions to maintain community standards and property values. These restrictions can regulate a wide range of activities, including the size and type of structures, landscaping, parking, and even lifestyle elements such as pets or occupancy. This ties directly to earlier discussions on disclosure. Buyers must be made aware of these restrictions before purchasing, as they can significantly impact how the property is used. For example, a buyer intending to store an RV on the property or operate a home-based business may be restricted by HOA rules or deed covenants. While these restrictions are intended to preserve value, they can also limit marketability if they are overly restrictive. Enforcement and practical challenges. Deed restrictions are not always easy to enforce. In many cases, enforcement falls to homeowners associations or other private entities rather than government agencies. This introduces a practical challenge for agents and buyers. Just because a restriction exists does not mean it is consistently enforced, but that does not eliminate the risk of future enforcement. This ties back to risk management principles discussed earlier. Agents should never assume a restriction will not be enforced. Buyers must be informed of the potential risk. Leases as encumbrances. Leases are another form of encumbrance that can impact property rights. When a property is subject to a lease, the tenant has a legal right to occupy the property under the terms of the agreement. This is especially important in transactions involving investment properties or tenant-occupied homes. Lease agreements can include restrictions on use, occupancy, maintenance responsibilities, and duration of tenancy. These terms can affect both the value of the property and the buyer's ability to take possession. This connects back to earlier discussions on due diligence. Buyers must review existing leases carefully to understand their rights and obligations before closing. Bringing it all together. At this point in the course, the broader picture of real estate ownership becomes clear. A property is not just a physical structure or a financial investment. It is a bundle of rights that may be limited by legal controls, private agreements, and community standards. From foreclosure timelines to REO transactions, and now to land use controls, each section builds on the idea that real estate professionals must understand not only how property is transferred, but also how it can be used. The most effective agents are those who can identify these limitations early, communicate them clearly, and guide their clients in making informed decisions. As we move into the next section, we will continue expanding on this concept by exploring additional land use restrictions, such as zoning, easements, and regulatory controls that further define property rights and limitations. Online discussion. Why are land use controls important in real estate transactions? Answer. Because they regulate how property can be used, which directly impacts value, development potential, and buyer expectations. How can deed restrictions affect a buyer after closing? Answer: they can limit how the property is used, such as restricting parking, business use, or property modifications. Why must agents disclose encumbrances to buyers? Answer: because encumbrances can significantly impact property rights and failure to disclose may result in legal liability.